Hi, and welcome to the fourth rewrite of this video's intro. More importantly, welcome to the most thorough, and let's be honest, least horny, review of Saber Ibuki that you will ever watch. I am aware that I sound very conceited, but I saw like 10 people say that my 23-minute long Writer Misaki review, link on the top right, was her best review. I also saw someone say that I don't sound like a washed towel. I appreciate the compliment, but I have no clue what it means. Do I sound like an unwashed towel? Leave a comment below explaining what the hell I just read. That all being said, I'm going to ride that newly inflated ego to our next destination. That's right, it's the long-awaited Ibuki review. If you are a frequenter of my Twitch streams, YouTube videos, or my Discord, you know that I call myself the Ibuki guy. If you're not one of those, why are you here? I've got a playlist of her doing all sorts of things, and recently, my JP account just finished completely maxing her out to 120. I consider myself to be a bit of an expert, if you couldn't tell. So, today, you're going to be graced by the okay, the ego trip is over, let's start. Ibuki-Douji, 5-star Saber. Of all the servants to come out this year, in my opinion, she is probably number 3 in terms of cracked servant releases, following Castoria and Van Gogh. Let's get this out of the way. I'm going to be seen as biased. I get that. My Ibuki is extremely strong. That being said, I use an average one fairly often on my ult, so I'm not completely disillusioned. With all that out of the way, I will now explain why Ibuki-Douji is the only Saber you will ever need. Okay, that phrase is a little misleading. You don't need any Saber in particular. What I mean is that you don't need another Saber for gameplay purposes if you have her. Let's begin. First off, she has the highest attack stat out of all Sabers. Great for her card damage focus. Speaking of card damage focus, she has a Buster deck, which helps even more. Her gains are pretty solid despite the deck, and she makes a decent amount of stars, also despite the deck. Her skills are pretty dumb, in a good way. First skill is the first immediate 50% battery to grace the Saber roster if you don't count recharge batteries. It's tied to a 3-time, 3-turn attack buff of 40%. Some people call this skill weak for some reason. I would assume that it is because they have no idea what they're talking about. Second skill is a sizable 3-turn Buster buff and a defense buff, both maxing at 30% on a 5-turn cooldown, tied to a 20-star bomb. Very good uptime. If there are no external buffs considered, her HP effectively becomes almost 21,000. It gets better. She has a passive that gives her 200 damage cut. If you've used Waver, of course you have, you've seen the impact of a 30% defense buff with a small damage cut. Waver's is a bit larger, but considering how notoriously squishy AoE Buster Sabers are, very welcome addition to the roster. The Buster affects almost her entire deck since she has a Buster deck with the Buster NP. The stars can be helpful for, well, critting. It's self-explanatory. The third skill looks really weird. NP Seal is very strange in a kit like hers, but I like it because it helps in team play. It can buy a turn for your survival options to come off cooldown in a pinch. You probably heard my spiel on NP Seal in my last review. 50% crit damage is pretty nutty for someone who already has superb stats. It's fairly easy to get her to crit between her Saber Absorb and her Star Bomb. 30% Buster, another 12% passive Buster, 50% crit, as well as 3 times a 40% attack. That is massive in the line of multiplicative attack buffs, especially when support buffs are not included. When she crits hard. Almost as hard as you should hit that subscribe button and like button. We're not done with this skill. A few months ago, we were done with the skill. Undead is a terrible niche. There are no undead servants. The sparse amount of undead enemies usually don't have enough HP to justify increased niche damage against them. But all that changed August 17th, 2022. Lucian changed that. Oh wait, no, I spoiled a non-existent beat for an optional story that no one likes. Okay, Game Press calls her Assassin of the Nightless City Caster. Not to be confused with Caster of the Nightless City. Assassin of the Nightless City Caster's NP is capable of applying the undead trait to all enemies. Just like how George can apply Dragon. It applies as a buff, so it can't be resisted. All of her team damage support affects Buster cards as well, meaning she's a fantastic support for Ibuki Saber. The only problem with her being an Ibuki friend is the fact that her banner is sandwiched between a Berserker banner and a Saber banner. If you're a huge fan of Ibuki, save as much SQ for that event as possible so you can get Ibuki, Assassin of the Nightless City, Caster, and Ibuki. Finally, we have her NP. It's ridiculous. It ignores defense, it ignores invuln, and after damage, you decrease their buster resist by 20%. That's on top of the 42% you already have. It's amazing for challenge quests since it penetrates unremovable invuln and defense buffs. It frees up your craft essence picks tremendously. So what makes Ibuki so crazy strong isn't just her versatility, it's how strong she manages to be in every damage roll despite being designed as a versatile servant. Shout out to redundant phrasing. I should probably define what I mean by damage roll. As I would define it, rolls mainly refer to AoE or single target servants within their specific class. In this instance, I would like to subdivide them by their focus. Some servants are more challenge focused and some are more farming focused. The former have more of a utility focus, and the latter usually either have good battery, good NP charge, refund, or both. Maybe even just good NP damage. Cool. What if I told you that Ibuki fits in all of these roles? AoE challenge quest. She has NP damage that is a bit above average. It depends on her first skill, which only affects 3 attacks. Her face cards can consume the attack buffs in place of the NP, but regardless, as it stands, she hits hard. Utility-wise, her NP ignores defense and invuln, which frees up her craft essence options in case the enemy has unremovable invulns or evades. This, coupled with the fact that her battery is larger than any of her buster competition, means picks like Black Grail are much more viable, which can in turn compensate for the fact that most of her competition has NP upgrades. AoE Farmer, 50% battery on a 6-turn cooldown. Do I need to say much else? She's useful with and without Vitch because of how large her battery is. I could go over the damage numbers and utilization and whatever, but I'm sure pretty much every other review ever went over this and it is boring. In the whole single core nonsense, she can cover your needs, but you, as usual, will need NP levels. That happens with everyone. However, if she has issues killing on wave 3, she has massive crits, so it means you can either finish them off on turn 3 or turn 4. I guess that if you're using Oberon for turn 3, it's a lot more of a problem, but you don't really have to use them as you only need 50% from a plug on wave 3. I won't speak much further on this because there are hundreds of videos on 3-turn setups that other people have made, and there's only one of me to work on the rest of this video. Single target farmer. She crits really hard. Lots of irregular nodes in more recent JP years have had a lot of Lancers for some reason. Gee, I wonder why. She excels because she can wipe an AoE wave and crit another wave. This is what I did on summer 2022 and Halloween 2021. I don't have a video for this, but you can just trust me. This brings up another interesting comp for irregular nodes. Double Ibuki. It's like double Van Gogh, but you don't have to NP unless you have no cards, but you're way more likely to get cards because there are 2 of them. I guess it's more like double Domon. Single target challenge quests. I kind of already covered it. Same thing as in AoE, but she crits really hard, so her utility is largely the same. Her first skill lasting 3 turns is pretty nice for these fights since she can dish out the critical equivalent of single target NPs on multiple turns. Don't cry because it's 3 times, smile because it's 3 turns. Because of all her 3-turn buffs that boost her crits, she doesn't get punished by break bars as hard. I don't have much else to say about this, so look at these buster crits. Whee! She also fits in some other subset roles. She's surprisingly good at soloing, and because of that, she can fit as a competent anchor. This segment is getting too long, so I will hit us with a short intermission of showing off her ability to solo. The biggest criticism of Ibuki's is competition. It doesn't help that there are so many AoE Saber banners in the next 6 months, including Muramasa. I have a lot to say about their comparison, but I can tell this video is getting very long. If you have Castoria, Muramasa is probably better, but if you don't, Ibuki is a lot more self-sufficient and easy to support. They're largely interchangeable, so it's pretty much down to character, card type, design, or whatever. If you'd like to hear a more in-depth comparison of the two plus Utilization or Saber, comment below and let me know, and then subscribe so you can see it when it eventually happens. What I am sure people want me to talk about is Artoria. She is by some seen as the top of the pack when it comes to AoE's Buster Sabers. She's way more flexible in farming teams with Vich, and her damage peaks higher. Aside from that, she doesn't really have anything. She has no survival, no critting, almost no support, and most importantly, no utility. You can count Battery as utility, but considering how she locks herself out of any card in P game without Vich on her burst turns, she can get punished pretty hard on break bars. Her downtime really hurts. We've got to look at their NP damage since that is one of their biggest points of comparison. Ibuki with all buffs active hits a solid 26,000. We have to consider her first skill though, since it only lasts 3 hits. Without this skill active, but with the others, she hits a little under 19k. A very substantial drop. As previously stated, Artoria's peak is way higher, almost 36,000. But if we don't include Vich's cooldown reduction, it only happens once every 5 turns. Her selling point is supposed to be NP spam, but she's carried by battery support. On any of the 4 4 non-burst turns, she hits for 18,000, basically the same amount of damage as Ibuki without her first skill. Ibuki can technically get more than 1 NP with her attack buff active, while Artoria cannot hit her peak more than once every 5 turns. Now, I am aware that Ibuki's first skill actually has a longer cooldown at 6 turns instead of 5 turns. That being said, the problem here I'm trying to highlight is their downtime where they're not doing damage. When Artoria isn't using her NP, she's not doing damage. She has an 18% attack buff and a 50% buster buff. That's all she has for damage, and the buster buff is only 1 turn. Ibuki has a bunch of 3-turn buffs that help her do damage when she isn't NPing, so she's not punished by that downtime. So we have to bring in Vitch now. Artoria has way better uptime on her Dragon Cord than she did before. She does more NP damage more often. She has a full buster deck, whereas Ibuki only has 3 buster cards. Vitch helps offensively, but that's it. She grants Artoria no utility and negative survival. As soon as your enemy evades, or uses a defense buff, or quick charges, Artoria is screwed. Ibuki is not. Ibuki even has some decent survival herself. At the end of the day, the only time Artoria really pulls through is when it comes to farming. Artoria is better for farming if you use Vitch, and Ibuki is better at pretty much everything else. Before we move on to the support section, I want to explain how exactly you're supposed to use her. This can help you form a basis as to which servants you might want to use when to achieve what. I've made emphasis throughout this video of how strong her card damage is. There is a bit of a stigma around servants that deal damage specifically through crits. You're at the mercy of card RNG, and sometimes you have to choose between damage and NP gain for a support. This sometimes matters with Ibuki, but since every crit hits pretty dang hard, you don't have to take all of them at the same time. I will now explain how to safely take her cards all of the time. I would also like to take a moment to explain what I like to call freestanding supports. Freestanding essentially means independent, but freestanding supports sounds cooler, so we'll stick with that. These supports are servants that don't need to take cards to achieve what you want to do. There are 2 subgroups in this category. The first one is servants that have notable self-battery that lets them use an NP without taking cards. Good examples of this include Hans, Paracelsus, Proto-Merlin, and Sherlock. The other group are supports that don't need cards because their NP is not worth using most of the time. This includes Koyanskaya, Qingong, Paracelsus, and both Scotties. Yes, Paracelsus fits in both of these categories. When using a card-based servant like Ibuki, it's nice to have at least 1 freestanding support so you don't suffer because a support didn't get their NP in time. Or you can do what I do and pretty much exclusively use those with Ibuki. That's why Hans is one of my most used supports with her. He gives her most everything she still wants, and he doesn't need much in the line of cards due to his massive battery and good NP game. Unless you're doing solos, she's kinda straightforward. She has all sorts of crit buffs, but no absorb, so investing Star Absorb is very useful, especially since she is a Saber. Absorb is complicated, so try to put it in short terms to save time. If you use a code that increases Absorb by 100%, it doubles its basic Absorb. Sabers have half the Absorb that Riders do. Riders have great Absorb, that's the reasoning. Load the Buster cards with Absorb, or Crit, or whatever relevant damage. Arts and Quick are alright with Star Bombs, and will also like the Mage command code. Solos require very specific setups depending on what you're trying to solo, so I'll just leave it at a general answer. I have to bring up Koyan Light. I don't like bringing farming or turn attack into this, and I actually won't here. It's really obvious how she affects Ibuki, considering how she covers the one largest problem with Ibuki's crits: consistency. She makes stars, she helps her absorb them, and she increases the uptime on her powerful skills. She has a reputation of reducing the team's survival, but if you want to see how you can work that into a more reasonable team, I have a few videos you can check out. In the context of Ibuki, I actually have a recent video on that. Look at the top right. Now that we're done talking about Koyanskaya, let's talk about Koyanskaya. This is pretty straightforward. Attack, buster, defense, and battery. 30% battery is a sweet spot. With the 50% battery and the 20% append, you're clear for an instant NP. Defense buff stacking is nice for her. They're also buster resist debuff friends. Hey, look, it's Hans. Shocker. He does everything except hard survival, defense buff stacking, and crit support. Gong also helps with the defense buff stacking. The Buster is helpful for obvious reasons. He does a lot to help her in the 3 turns he's around. He sees the best use in fights against single target enemies since he has control with his taunt. The fact that his NP is useless as a support means you never have to worry about starting charge. That gives you a lot of freedom. I usually either use 2030 or Cam 1. Leonidas offers stars, 3-turn buffs, and a taunt. He doesn't need cards, meaning you can take those massive snake cards whenever they appear. He gives you a bunch of opportunities for the Buster card starting bonuses if you don't get as many cards when you want them. Okay, I am sick of this. Stheno is a good support, and I'm tired of pretending she isn't. She's actually a surprisingly good support for Ibuki. She offers a lot of attack mod for 3 turns, buff removal, and some stall stuff. Between her Drain and Ibuki's NP seal, they could stall out a few turns. If they're male, that's a huge bonus. Her deck used to be a bit wonky, but the Mighty Chain update really helped her out. In ways, it's actually better than a lot of decks. Mixing up the decks is nice for making a Servant crit more often with all those great starting bonuses. You're likely to use her in tandem with a support that has an arts deck like Chen or Hans. Also, if you don't get the cards for a Mighty Chain, you can grab the Buster starting bonus from her easily accessible NP. I explained why Assassin of the Nightless City caster is a good support for her earlier. I'll explain a little further because of how loaded her kit is. She isn't restricted to offensive support. She has a charge drain and a stun that both synergize with Ibuki's NP seal. Debuff clear, NP gain, NP charge, and heals are all really nice utilities to have alongside those. The one problem with her is the fact that she is not a freestanding support. She is a DPS at heart, but she has a load of buffs that help the entire team. If you want the huge damage bonus from her undead niche, you need starting charge. She's the only one I listed that is not a freestanding support, and because of that, I highly recommend going for NP2 if you roll her. That will let you get her a second append, meaning she won't be joined at the hip with the K-scope. You do have to use her NP to start the damage increase, but it isn't too bad since it's a Buster NP. It can kick off a chain with the Buster starting bonus, meaning you can still get some pretty strong crits. I've heard people dismiss her as a meme support for some reason. The amount of damage she offers is nuts. 80% special attack, 35% attack, and 15% Buster is nothing to scoff at. That's 3 turns of uptime, and that's more than what a lot of strong supports offer. One last thing I would like to add. If you're willing to use Assassin Caster, I highly recommend considering Santa Martha as well. She offers even more anti-undead damage, loads of attack mod, and even some good crit support. Before we finish up here, I'd like to show off what kind of crazy stuff you can do when you turn them undead and you also just happen to have a 120 Ibuki. In conclusion, 10 out of 10. Shocking, I know. Ibuki-Douji is a Saber that plays like a burst DPS, but for some reason functions for 3 turns at a time. She's very self-sufficient with her damage buffs. While all her AoE buster competition is notoriously squishy, she manages to stand out on her own with her own survival and her own stall. All in all, she's a very solid DPS for both new players and veteran players. Thanks everyone for watching this. I've got a few announcements. The night she drops, I'm gonna be going live on Twitch to roll for her. I got like over 1,000 SQ saved up, and I'm shooting for NP5. If you wanna see that happen, go in the description. I've got my Twitch link there. We do some chill streams. And also, if you haven't joined our Discord channel, link in the description as well. And lastly, there's this one big video on the way. Another Power of 120 video coming up soon. Actually, possibly 2. So look forward to that. You're gonna get to see what cracked stuff a 120 Ibuki is capable of. So subscribe so you can see that, and I will see you on the flip side.